I slept through the last one.
We have a couple of people from the board of directors on here. Kyle, you think it's okay to start?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you're at 7:04, so I mean 6:04. You should go for it.
Shannon said she can get on at 6:30, so or she's working till 6:30. So I sent her the Zoom link.
Okay. It's December 21st, 2020. This is the GBOS GFR, Girdwood Fire Rescue work session by Zoom. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors and its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Open Meetings Act. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We're going to do a roll call of people first, and I'll start. My name is Jerry Fox, and I'm co-chair and Roads and Public Utilities. We'll go through GBUS first, and then Fire Board. Mike?
Mike Edgington, co-chair, Land Use Supervisor.
Brianna?
Brianna Sullivan, Parks and Recreation and Cemetery Supervisor.
Aaron?
Aaron Boone, Fire Department Supervisor.
And I don't see James on here yet. Next up, we'll go through Board of Directors. Nick?
Yeah, Nick, I'm here, President, Board of Directors.
Larry?
Larry Daniels, Board of Directors member.
Michelle?
Present.
Okay, we're all here. I have an agenda in front of me. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written unless somebody has some changes they would like to make.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote, and we'll just do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay. Announcement. The public is encouraged to ask questions, provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. Please keep your phone muted until called to talk. To keep the discussions productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public, and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. Land use, trails, and public safety advisory committees will all hold officer elections at their January 2021 meetings. Girdwood Board of Supervisors seats A and B are up for election in the April municipal election. Filing is from January 15th to January 29th. And the MOA GBUS quarterly meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 25th at 4 p.m. Those are the announcements. We'll go to the first work session topic. It says GBUS GFR discussion regarding municipal administration and fire department. I guess that's the title. And what we're first going to start out with, I guess, is the status of the contract negotiation. And I know that with the new administration, we kind of seem to have a stall. We were waiting for Falsey to get back, and then Falsey never came back. So we reached out. I know Kyle's reached out. And Kyle, have you heard anything back from the administration?
Yes. So last Friday, I talked for about half hour with Annie Henderson, who is the new city manager. She came over from Municipal Light and Power, where she was the director of that until the sale to Chugash. And I brought her up to speed on this particular topic. I had 3 issues for her. And this one I made a priority, saying, if anything, we want you to address this one first. And she seemed very supportive. She didn't want to be seen as stopping the progress on this, or the mayor, for that fact, the interim mayor right now. They don't want to stop progress on things that were being worked on during the previous leaders of the administration. She is going to call in tonight to the GBOS meeting to introduce herself and get acquainted. I explained to her that the last 3 city managers have had a good working relationship with the Board of Supervisors, and that the Board of Supervisors wanted to continue that. So when I got, it seemed like she was supportive of moving things along and learning as much as she can about what's been going on. I explained to her the process has been going on for 4 years, that within the last 18 months, we were making progress on this with one large delay for COVID. and now the second because of this administration change. And that it's critical that we get to a conclusion before the end of first quarter revisions, so that increase can be enacted for the EMS contribution that comes from area-wide. And I kind of give her a quick breakdown on it, and then about the proposal that Girdwood Fire had sent to the fire department and where they were at in that area of exchanging information, and that things have just sort of stopped with no conclusion as to when it's going to start. So that's where we're at.
And then
Sorry, I was going to ask, Michelle, do you have anything to add?
just that I've been asked to reformat everything and put it into like what they would see normally for a service level agreement. So I'm going to do that, and I have not provided that to them yet.
So when we say first quarter revisions, we're talking really, we have to have something out there by like February.
Yeah, February into March, nothing is approved until after election for first quarter budgets. So there is a bit of a room there into April. Once the new assembly is seated, and even into May maybe, once the new assembly is seated, then they approve those first quarter revisions as their first action.
And
I don't think there are any assembly elections this year, aren't they? I thought this is the mayoral one. I may have misunderstood.
Well, maybe with a new mayor, but it is.
Yeah. That could not be until July. The new mayor is July 1st, typically.
There's no, well, I need to look at that. I thought there was.
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe I'm wrong.
I thought there was an assembly seat turning. So, but either way, they don't do first quarter revisions until the first assembly meeting after the election is certified. Because the new mayor will hold this budget going forward for, so even if it's just a mayor, they're going to still want to have input on it.
And then separate from that, one of the mayor candidates who used to be the municipal manager sent me a note just saying, hey, you know, still push forward on first quarter budget revisions. Thought that was interesting.
What, sorry.
Go ahead, Aaron.
What do you think he meant by that as far as planning for next year?
Yeah, I think as in, yeah, keep forward on the momentum of first quarter budget revisions for the contract, I think.
Okay. I had a question for you too, Michelle. The information that they asked you to provide in a different format, does that request still stand with the change?
Yes, I have to put it together in a way which is a little challenging, but yes. So I still owe them that, but sending it to them right now when they're trying to end up the year, nobody would have looked at it. So I kind of was waiting until they get to January to give it to them.
Okay.
They're not going to make any decisions on anything unless they're prompted to by a higher power.
Just to finish off my last comment, there are no assembly elections in April, only four school board seats, the mayor and service areas. So the same 11 people will be, I mean, unless there's a recall or something.
So Michelle, I will ask the board of directors, is there a reason to start another contract negotiation meeting?
Well, I don't think at this moment, no. I had a meeting with the two bat chiefs a couple weeks ago, and they were, you know, their thing was off the record type of counseling, like we don't think it's going to move anything's going to move this administration, right? So, but that was before Kyle had that discussion with the acting municipal manager, so that's different, right? So, you know, I mean, there was other political agendas going on for this year, which was that mental health team thing. So I'm not surprised that we got pushed to the side because they were trying to push that through. So
I'm just kind of wondering, what's the next step here?
the next step is I have to completely reformat everything and give them a new spreadsheet to show that we need even more money, which they will then say, yeah. So
Kyle, do you have any input into what our next political step would be?
Well, it sounds like Michelle's got to finish the homework and get that turned in, and then I think once we do that, then we should really set for a meeting to them to come back with information that was requested and continue on. And if anything, I think tonight from the GVOS with Annie is to really request that she keeps pushing the fire chief of AFD to progress these talks along once Girdwood finishes the requested information and keep it going in that motion. There's no denying that, you know, if we don't get something done by the first quarter revisions, then there's going to be no increase, and we're going to have to look at the Girdwood taxpayers to once again subsidize the EMS costs for you know, responses outside of, you know, just in general for EMS responses. So
well, the other thing is also is AFD has been here a lot lately. All of that would have been fixed if we actually could pay people to be on call, right? So, you know, they're here a lot. Engine 9's kind of tired and frustrated, and they're now like, why can't you get the contract fixed, right? Like, this seems like you guys are getting screwed, right? Because they're also frustrated. So, because Engine 9 has to keep, you know, what happens is everybody goes out, and so it's me, no matter when it is, and then Engine 9 will, if they are available, come down and cover. So, you know, so I was spending lots of quality time with Engine 9 and Medic 9, who, you know, they're nice guys, but this doesn't have to be like this. So.
Can I ask Michelle, is the can I ask Chief if the requested information for the SLA, is that separately accounting for the costs of EMS provision and fire provision?
Well, before we were just doing fire or doing EMS, excuse me. Now they want us to do fire. So, you know, to do it properly, I have to go hit NFPA 1720 for the staffing. And so that's going to show that we don't have enough daily staffing.
So are you, what I mean is the presentation in a form that makes it easy to separate out those two areas of responsibility?
Yes. Yes,
Thank
because
you.
I'm going to have to do it on a per rig basis, per apparatus
right.
basis.
Right.
So part of the presentation you'll see tonight is I'll talk about structure fire and vehicle extrication response, and I'll show, you know, this is what normally goes to these calls, right? And this is what typically you should, you know, this is the staffing. And then there's minimum standards that you should have for fire staffing. And we don't meet that right now because, of course, we don't have enough people on. So, yeah. So what that's going to show, unfortunately, it's going to show probably that, you know, because every day we have this choice of once EMS starts going out, we don't have a fire response in the community. So you're going to, you know, it's going to show you need to have fire. I think everybody, at least you talk to the BAT chiefs, you talk to firefighters, everybody agrees you need to have the fire response and the EMS response. But what we have on a daily basis is we have an EMS response or we have a fire response. Some days, you know, it's good, but other days, not so much. And definitely when AFD's here, that means we have no response other than me.
So
I have a question for the group. This is Nick, by the way. You know, so we're obviously looking at next year, you know, not having enough money to do what they want us to do, and they say that's the same situation for all stations in Anchorage. And what happens with those stations when they still need to do their work but actually can't pay their bills? Where does that money come from?
So two things happen. They just go over, right? So it's not unusual for AFD to be over by 1 or 2 million. at the end of the year. That's totally normal. Oftentimes they are having managed that budget when it was at 65 million. Oftentimes we would be managing it by holding a vacancy factor. We don't obviously have a vacancy factor, so we can't manage it that way. So that basically, because there's a graphs that's happened, which, okay, I'm gonna staff all my minimum staffing, which is something that we don't have here, but you're gonna see presented to AFD very shortly. So minimum staffing's here. Here's my vacancy factor. If I keep my vacancy factor high, I just pay all these people for the minimum staffing by overtime. But that starts to crash at a certain point in time because you burn everybody out. So right now what we have is we don't have a minimum staffing standard. We're running apparatus with not enough people on it to do the work that the apparatus is supposed to do. We don't have enough budget. So we, you know, not great.
What pays that $1 million overage in acre?
Usually you have to go to the assembly and at the end of the year, and you have to say, I'm very sorry, our budget was over. We promise we will never do it again. And then the assembly makes an action and pulls money from some account and pays it.
Nick, it comes from the municipality's undesignated fund for that area, which is usually the result of surpluses from other departments.
And are we not able to tap into that undesignated fund when we go over?
We're independent as a service area. We have our own undesignated fund. So whatever surpluses we have fall back into our accounts.
Is there a I mean,
minus the whole EMS area-wide thing that's kind of gray.
I mean, that's the two issues we're facing here. One is the total amount of money, and one is the split between what we pay as area-wide taxpayers versus what we pay as service area taxpayers.
I guess my lead up with these questions is, you know, I think our best interest in trying to figure out what we do to go forward is to basically, between now and when the new administration comes in, come up with a plan to say, okay, well, we're not going to be able to fund our fire department for this year, and when we hit that limit, this is what our actions are going to be. Either we decrease service, or we decide, Girdwood decides we want to pay for it, like whatever it winds up being. But I think if we have all that game plan already set out in our heads when we go to approach this new administration, they know what the ramifications are going to be if we don't get properly funded.
And so the other way that AFD has managed this before is if they don't have enough money, is they'll do a rolling closure, right? So they'll close. So on times, it's not unusual to have like a whole engine company, so like 12 people off sick out of 300. And so if they don't have, instead of not calling in overtime, they might just close a rig. So for us, it's a little different, obviously. Because we're not providing minimum staffing at all on a daily basis. So.
This is Larry.
Oops.
Go ahead, Larry.
Go ahead.
So I think it sounds like we won't get any action out of the administration until we have a new mayor, which starts July 1st. And then that's going to take them at least 2 months to actually get their feet on the ground. So we're talking next fall before anything actually most likely happens. Is that a fair assessment?
My belief is that we're trying to get this done before first quarter revision. So we're trying to get this extra money before March or before April for sure. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's what I encourage you all to push for. I don't know I don't know the character or the structure of this, you know, what these people are thinking, but it's really the power of what comes out of Girdwood's gonna hope I get that answer.
And there's kind of two things we're asking for. I think what we're really asking for is they fix the balance between area-wide and service area fire department funding across the whole municipality, which is kind of a big ask. So, you know, we can back off to just simply getting more money for Girdwood. But we really want the first one solved.
I don't know that we want the first one solved.
Well, that's the right thing, and that's the thing that they're legally obligated to do.
But
if
you know they're not going to do that, Mike.
I know they're not going to do that over the time, but if we approach it that way, if we ask for the big thing, which obviously they're going to want to avoid, then the simple solution which shuts us up is just providing more money locally.
To me, I just think we should go with a simple solution of providing us more money locally.
Well, that's obviously what we want, but we can ask for both. And then we appear much more reasonable by asking just for more money locally rather than changing the whole system.
But we did ask for more money locally, and they went, at
Yeah.
that.
Hence what you actually want to, I would suggest what we want to do is go in and actually get them to fix the real problem, which is a huge lift. And therefore it makes the more money solution look much more reasonable.
To me, I would think we would want to get this solved before first quarter revisions. And we know they're not going to solve the difference between fire and EMS before then. And that's what we should focus on, not focus on that other.
Well, I mean, so as a strategy, so we can, if we can come up with a number that we feel is what we need to have, what's going to be our, what's going to be the negotiating strategy?
I wouldn't be discussing that in a public position.
Okay, how would we? I guess we'll have to discuss how that would work. I mean, somewhere in some part of this organization, perhaps it's between the fire board and the chief, that we discuss that negotiating position then.
Correct.
Well, we do seem to be the only contractor that's providing this service. And it's strange to me that this contractor cannot get a cost of living increase to do the work provided.
What about Chugiak? Did they get a cost of increase?
They got a decrease.
Which they were fine with?
Yes, because they are 100% volunteer and they have a large tax base. And so they are very proud of being volunteers.
Because all their money goes
fabulous for them, but it's a totally different. Everybody keeps comparing us to Chugiak, and we're nowhere. We're not anything like Chugiak.
Yeah, I know that. I just couldn't remember what they did. Now I remember they use all their money to buy equipment, and that's it. They don't pay each other. So
yeah. They have about 4 positions. They have the chief, and then they have a mechanic, and they have a couple other people.
Do they have responsibility for the Glen Highway or parts of the Glen?
Yes.
Yes. But they also agreed to go to a minimum level of BLS for EMS support.
Right. And part of the reason I was told that they don't want to talk about funding extrication on the highway was because of Chugiak, but I don't understand why Chugiak wouldn't want more money. I can tell you, Chief Benningfield is a wonderful person, but we philosophically have very different approaches to municipal funding.
I also think a shortfall with Anchorage too is, like we're talking about cost of living increases and everything, that they're not even willing to give us a scope of work. Like when you're a contractor being hired by a municipality, that's the first thing that they provide is a scope of work. Like they need to provide us what level of service they want area wide, so we can give them an accurate cost. And I know they're trying to go about this in a roundabout way, but what do they want from us?
Well, Nick, I agree with that because it's hard. I'm building as I build this grandiose structure, that service level agreement that I'm going to show them. It's hard when I don't have a scope of work, right?
Yeah. So you can't build costs unless you have a scope of work. If they don't like your cost, then they can decide, they need to decide to say, you want rescue coming out of Girdwood, not Station 9. They need to tell you that.
Right.
There are two different.
So I agree. And so I thought that when I sent them the first proposal that said 24/7 EMS ALS staffing, here's who it's staffed by, here's what it is, and option A or B, staffing for a BLS rig on the weekends and then also on holidays, those 12 holidays, I thought that was pretty specific of, do you want me to provide this? This is what we want to provide. Is this what you want? Right? So I find it odd that they don't understand what, and here's what, we know we go to 97 calls on the Seward Highway. Here's what it costs on average for us to respond to these things. So here is a service level agreement for that. But apparently that was confusing, and now we are rewriting it.
My feeling is they were stalling.
Oh, they're totally stalling.
They were unprepared for all the meetings we've had this summer, and Falsey was out the door, and basically everything was stalling, and they just put more work on your plate to hold us,
Well,
to
exactly.
basically hold us off for a few more months.
Exactly. That's why I have not finished this,
It's busy work.
It is busy work, and it takes days to do, and it's busy work that they're not going to make any decision on, right? And so there's other things that are higher priorities to get done than the busy work that I know they're not going to look at until the new mayor comes in.
So what, how do we get a first quarter decision from Anchorage if we don't even know who to ask? Even when they had like legitimate people in place, like a mayor and a city manager, we couldn't get them to respond to us.
Because the other thing, Nick, is you can remember when we had the last contract meeting, we said to them, they'll tell you, I think it was you, was saying, tell us what the scope of work you want. And then they said, well, it's whatever your community wants to have provided. It's like, no, tell us what the expectation is, right?
Yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes to fire service, there's two different SOWs. There's an SOW for EMS, which is paid for by area wide, and there's an SOW for fire service, although, conceptually. And we as the board of supervisors are, we are the people who are basically purchasing that service and paying for that service for fire. So I think we do have an expectation and set of expectations around that. That's purely community. When it comes to EMS service, the community would definitely wants to, has feelings about, the level of service we want. And I think we would like something comparable to the Anchorage Bowl. But we can only really do that indirectly because we're not paying for it in principle. In actual fact, we are, because it's going through the fire budget. But I mean, in principle, we're not paying for it. It's coming from area wide. So that's really about, the municipality as a whole, what their expectations are of area wide EMS services. But we can influence that. If we're being told we're going to get a lower level of service and pay direct from the service area for that, then obviously we can exert our influence then.
But what we've already heard is okay, so first, remember when, let's step back in time to June, 6 months ago, when they said, just give us the EMS staffing that you want and the extrication. And we shot that to them. And then they sat on it for months. And then they went, my God, it's too much money, right? So to me, we were saying, we want 24/7 ALS staffing. Here's an option for this. Here, extrication, but the answer back is, well, show us everything now, right? Like, do you understand? Like, I don't think that I will put this together, but I can tell you, it's going to show a higher level of fire because we're not meeting minimum national standards for fire response, and then it's going to show EMS, so the number is going to be large. So, but I don't think that I guess I am frustrated. Obviously, I'm frustrated. Some of it could also be the COVID shot because everybody feels half of us feel great, half of us feel like crap today after the COVID shot. But my frustration is, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, whenever I got here, I looked at the budget and I said, it's wrong. Look at this is why it's wrong. And so I feel like we're closer than we've ever been, but I have no faith that anything is going to happen, before a new mayor comes in. But I will make another spreadsheet, but I don't think this is gonna,
Well, it seems like to me that, they're making us do the work to split out fire and EMS. The fire financial responsibilities come down on our service area. We understand that. And so if we need to get more money out of our service area or decide how we service our fire, that's our decision. I think we need to come up with a game plan on how we approach, this current interim administration and the new administration on how we ask for the EMS money, how we ask for a scope of work from what they want us to provide for them, and from what mile marker to what mile marker with what apparatus and all this, so we can give them a legitimate cost and then provide them that information. And if they aren't willing to fund it, then we need to have already in the works, okay, well, if you can't fund that, then this is what we're going to do. We'll provide it on the weekends. You cover it on the midweeks with Station 9 or something. Whatever it may be, but I think that's how we need to approach it. And if we want to do it with this interim administration, let's give it a shot. And most likely nothing's going to happen probably till next fall, or nothing next year. Who knows,
Well, so one other way to look at it, we have the things that we do have responsibility for and control over, and that is the fire service scope of work. Maybe that's what we work on, and we say, well, this is the amount of money, and when we're, and that's the staffing that we're going to have at the station. If whatever, you tell us how much money you're giving us, and we'll set up that level of service for EMS so that we don't go in the hole.
But all that comes down to us having a cardiac arrest event, and then me having to say, sorry, I don't have EMS. I don't have EMS. I mean, it's awkward. You understand how it's awkward for me.
Oh, I get how it's awkward, but I mean, it's, we're in a, catch 69
Right.
by this circular conversation, and we need to get back into something that we can control and tell the municipality that we're part of the municipality too. These are the area-wide EMS is your problem, and make them accept that responsibility. And
and I agree with you. So that might be like we start off the year and then we just admit at a certain point in time, like April or May, we run out of money, right, for EMS.
Right.
And then we have the conversation, and that'll be timed right with the election.
Right.
Well, I think we should have the conversation now. I mean, with the discussion that Kyle had with Annie, it sounded hopeful. And sometimes, new people coming in, they don't have a whole load of things on their plate. It's what's put in front of them, sometimes what they focus on. So I think it's worth trying, at least, to push it now.
I agree.
One suggestion I may have for the Girdwood Fire Board to work on is that, right now you're going to get 206,000 something funding for 2021. Maybe you should contemplate as a board as to what can you do with that 206,000 and give a scenario back to the AFD as to what that is and what level of service that is. And it may be just that hypothetically, maybe you cannot leave the Girdwood service area. That will cover your stand-up costs for response within the Girdwood service area, which was the whole reason the Girdwood Fire Department was set up for the Girdwood service area. Over time, mission creep has taken them all the way up the Turning Pass now, out to Hope.
And we're not going to Hope anymore.
Yeah, either way, you're going all the way up to almost a Hope Junction.
But we have gone up Turning Pass since the early 90s, in the 90s.
Right? But my point is that it's just expanded and expanded. And right. AFD has become more and more comfortable with that while getting a deal for it. And so maybe there's some homework on that side as to, okay, we can't get an increase, here's what we can financially do. Otherwise, we look at, if you want us to go out there and you're not willing to fund us, you're looking at the service area to subsidize the EMS response, and here's how much that's going to cost.
Now, I will tell you that AFISA, Kenai Borough, is paying their bills fabulously. And so that's giving us an extra, 18,000, 12,000-ish. That's going well. And they just gave us $20,000 worth of extrication equipment.
Hey, Chief, I have a question for you. Like responding to Kyle's comments, that 200,000 that we do get from them, have we ever taken that dollar amount and actually shown what that will provide as level of service? Is that just like an EMS rig for the year? Or?
No.
Well, it's not an EMS rig for a year. It's not staffing. It's not even close to staffing for a year.
I mean, I think that is a good approach to show them like this is what we have for EMS and this is what we can provide for that dollar amount. If you want more, then.
So my expectation with an ambulance is that we have 24/7 staffing for an ambulance at an ALS level, recognizing that we often go on 2 to 5 calls a year, 2 to 5 calls a day during, ski season weekends. But that's the staffing. Now it's tricky because while we might have 3 paid staff here during the day, the entire thing is built on people donating their time to be on call, paid on call. So the value of the paid on call time, I think, has not been recognized in all of this discussion as well.
So we have about 15 minutes, a little over 15 minutes left in the discussion. We've got a couple other things on the agenda. So for going forward, Michelle, do you think you could get that back to them in a couple weeks?
It all depends on our call volume here, but yes.
And if you get it back in a couple weeks, then they're going to have that information. Then our next step would be to do what?
Immediately set a meeting after that. Give them a deadline as to when you're going to, for them to review the information and then get back for a discussion.
So I do feel that I need to present it to you first, so you're not shocked or anything.
We could set another work session for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or special meeting, whatever.
Let's try to just keep this moving if we can. If you could do that in the next couple of weeks, we could have a work session. We have a municipal meeting in January, and if we don't, say it again?
About the 25th, isn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
And if we don't have anything moving by then, we could kind of give an ultimatum at that meeting that we need to set a meeting to go forward or whatever. But it's at some point we got to set some sort of ultimatum that, we've got to have results.
I think we need to be discussing the budget and the problems we have on the 25th. I mean, that's the forum to discuss it with the acting, possibly acting mayor, but definitely with the city manager.
And how we go forward. So if we could kind of push to get these numbers to them before that, and then have our meeting to discuss those numbers, I think that's a good path forward. Does everybody agree?
I agree.
I think that's good. I just had a question for Michelle. The reformatting that you're doing, I mean, we've seen these numbers before, right? Or are they different?
I'm putting it by apparatus because it has to be by, it's a service level, so it has to be by apparatus. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little different, but it's worthy of doing, right? So.
But it adds up basically to the same amount that.
No, it's going to be more. It's going to be more because we need to meet minimum staffing. So it's going to be more, but yeah. Stay tuned.
I guess I'm curious why it changed if you're doing it by apparatus versus the format.
Because fire wasn't included in it before. In fire, we are not meeting minimum standards for fire staffing.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, we're going to move forward. Next on the agenda. What status of Rescue 41 area-wide bond? Kyle or Michelle, who wants to go on this one?
It has moved past I was notified it's moved past the mayor approved it, so that it goes to the assembly next for area-wide for approval.
And so I'll ask, I don't know when that happens, Kyle, but I would assume it would be good for us as a board or for us as individuals to contact our assembly people?
Yes, for sure. And you will be discussing at the next meeting too. And Michelle will give a presentation about 2 red trucks aren't the same. And so at that point, and hopefully John or Suzanne will be there, but I think going forward, yes, I think it'll be good. And we should ask them if they're there tonight. I think we already have a resolution out of GBOS, but if not, we will
Yes.
definitely recommend a resolution out of GBOS.
Yeah, so it's at 870,000, so a little less than we would have wanted for, but they're trying to keep all the bonds under 60 million. So I'm just very pleased that it at least has made it onto the table for discussion.
Yeah, the biggest thing will be language, and we think we're pretty clear that it will be an area-wide rescue, not a Girdwood rescue apparatus, because we know sometimes with the word Girdwood in a bond, it just screws it over.
Yeah, so it won't. So it'll just say rescue truck. It'll probably be lumped with ambulances. So that's a good place to be.
Correct.
Can we take the word Girdwood completely out of it and just
Yeah,
call
Girdwood's,
it Station
the
41?
word Girdwood's already out of it.
It will be out of it. It's going to be area-wide rescue 41.
Anything
And then there's
else?
a presentation on that on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think we don't need to talk about that anymore, do we?
No.
Okay, next on the agenda is mayor transition team. I don't know that there's anything we need to talk about that.
It's just something to put on here. I think when we ever determine who the new mayor is going to be, it would be really important that Girdwood gets an advocate on there to advocate to get that mayor up to speed on just Girdwood and the Girdwood issues that are at hand. So as that gets there, and that after post-election, I think it'd be nice from somebody from GBOS to really push to get a Girdwood on the transition team so that they get briefed and brought up to speed quickly.
Oh, I gotcha.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you know, what happens is when a mayor gets elected, they create a transition team, and the transition team goes out and finds out information about everything related to everything. And there's different aspects about it. And we feel that there should be somebody who's a strong representative of Girdwood to bring up the new incoming mayor to what's going on in Girdwood and what Girdwood means to especially if it's somebody who has not been in the city at all before. Because a lot of times, even like with Annie, I had to bring her up and explain the whole thing about what Girdwood is, and Girdwood's a town within a city, and how we are geographically separated, so it makes it difficult getting things done, things like that. So,
Does it require the previous mayor to actually concede the election? Or? Sorry, that's it.
We can get into that later.
I've been on a number of mayor transition teams for Anchorage. It's super important because, you know, they'll set what they're going to do in 30, 60, 90 days usually. And so it's super important to get the Girdwood issues on there right at the beginning before they come in, and then have somebody who educates everybody, the people that are coming in, about Girdwood issues. I can't stress enough the importance of getting people on, at least one or two Girdwood people on the transition team.
I mean, in terms of timing, it's very likely that the April election nobody will exceed 45% of the vote. So we're going to have some period of time where we have two candidates going to the runoff.
Correct.
So there's an opportunity there to sort of work out who would work best.
Correct.
Is that a volunteer position, or are you thinking it would be someone from the board, or?
It's always been a volunteer position.
And it's
there's
usually
a number of meetings.
And it's usually really structured by maybe the incoming chief of staff, or basically the campaign itself. They create their transition team. And the most recent one was when Berkowitz came in, and Shauna Hagna ended up on the transition team. And I don't know if she was on the economic development or with a native business side or things like that, but she was from Girdwood. She was a person who was on there. So
it could be anyone in the community.
Correct, but it's good to get in and try to figure out how to get somebody in there who understands Girdwood.
Is this a topic on GBOS's agenda?
Not at this point, but we just want to make sure people are aware of it. We're going to kind of probably wait to put it on towards closer to election results.
Okay, next up is 2020 budget and forecasting for 2021. Michelle, how are we doing?
Oh, I was just going to get off. How are for 2020? We are going to be over as we predicted, but we believe it's going to be between 30 and 40,000. It could be a lot less, but that's kind of where we're headed.
Now,
Less than last year.
when you say 30 or 40 over, we've already designated some money to go toward that. Is that correct?
Yes, including that. That's including that.
Well,
So
no,
then-
you've designated capital funds that we can use for the overrun, for the shortfall. And so of those capital funds, we're going to transfer 40,000 to the fire department to cover the shortfall that they're projecting. Now that shortfall, most likely that's a little liberal, just in case there's some craziness over these next 15 days as they finish out their fiscal year and pay their end of, because they're going to get a full payment for a year about January 5th. And so there's about a 5-day period in there where they'll need funding to take that. But Chief has, is working her best to keep expenses down. Payroll is the biggest unknown at this point. And she has an incentive program going to keep people coming in and responding to calls and things like that, because they've been having a lot of holes and shortages, and then we got the unknowns like tonight through tomorrow, these storms rolling in, and what's that going to mean to responses and 4,000 people in the valley. So what we'll do is we're going to transfer those 40,000 after the year end books are closed. Then Chief Weston will give a report back to GBOS as to actually what was spent and what was remaining, and then we can factor that into next year's discussions. And the other thing that is on their plate is to forecast what is going to be needed for 2021. There's so many things in the air that make it difficult to figure that out. If these negotiations get worked out and we're able to get more money out of the EMS, then that changes what the Girdwood service area needs to do, all these different factors. So that will come in probably to better vision as we get into January and February.
So just to clarify, when Chief, you say 30-odd thousand, that's within the 40,000 we've already decided. That's
Yeah.
not in addition to.
No, that's within. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be less, but I really, Girdwood's full of people. Turnagain Pass is full of people. Crazy weather, not a lot of police. We're all the perfect storm is happening, right? So I just can't predict staffing over the next staffing call volume over the next two weeks, 15 days, or whatever it is. 9 days.
And one other point too is that, GBOS approved 74,000 to be liquid if we had to use it for the shortfall. At this point, we're only going to use 40,000. The remaining funds, we're right now working to get them as a contribution to the capital fund. So we're working with AFD's finance to get those monies moved over and then dropped into Girdwood Fire's capital account, which we can, will increase their account for the capital purchase, which we're going to discuss at the next meeting, which is Engine 41.
I think it's going to be less. I just, we have to have a cushion there in case Armageddon happens in the next couple of weeks, next week.
Any questions about the budget from anybody?
I have a hypothetical question for Chief. As you're putting your numbers together for 2021, or I guess you've already started or thought about it, and you're saying that we're, currently have always been understaffed for fire in our valley. Obviously that number is going to go up, and I know that we're pretty much at our max with taxing ourselves to fund that number. What's our solution locally in our valley to cover the correct staffing we need to provide fire service in Girdwood?
I don't have a good answer for that at the moment, truthfully. I
guess it's more of a GBOS question.
I do think that we have to focus on retention this next year, because the revolving door of training, investing a lot of money in people and training them and then having them leave isn't working, isn't really, it works for some people, but not for everybody. And I think that we need to focus on retention of the staff that we have. Truly, the last, You know, we've had a lot of high stress fatality calls in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and truly the shouldering the burden of the work, as you know, has been the staff that's coming out on overtime to try and make things happen, even though we're not meeting minimum staffing for like a structure fire response. So
And I'll chime in with a question or comment for Nick. I mean, my belief is that if we were adequately funded for EMS, we would then have extra funds for fire, and we would then be able to do a more adequate job of funding the fire. And so, you know, like when I started on the board, it was $600,000 every year that we supplied for the contract. Now it's almost $1 million. And, you know, it's supposedly just for fire, but it's really not. It's for EMS. So if we were to get, let's say, Michelle, $500,000 more for EMS, you would agree that we could adequately fund, or at least better adequately fund fire. I mean, when you talk about these things, it just depends, you know, how you can spend, you know, millions if you wanted, but, you know, there's a limit to what we can spend.
right. And I do know when I look at other departments of our size and that we are being very thrifty. It might not seem like it at the time, but we are actually very thrifty, again, with all this donated on-call coverage in making things work. But it's still challenging, and we're still burning some people out. So I would rather have them not burn out and be productive response members versus burning everybody out. But that's been the historical sort of model of Girdwood Fire, where we burn people out because they will take on, you know, for the good of the community, and then they just get tired. So
I mean, I guess I understand all that. You know, as we're doing this exercises to produce all this financial information based on apparatus, I mean, you know, we're focusing all of our energies on EMS and what we can get out of Anchorage, but you know, this is our opportunity to really evaluate our fire service area and the money we're putting towards it, and if we're adequately staffed, if we're adequately apparatused and everything, and if we're actually paying for what we want to have as fire coverage in this valley.
I'm going to have to end the meeting. I think, Larry, do you have one quick comment?
I was just going to ask if we could, maybe this is just for the fire board service group, but have a work session in early January, you know, a couple of hours to spend discussing sort of the, you know, this circular question about how to get our way out of it, so we can present it both to the board of supervisors and to the Anchorage Fire Department.
I have a quick comment to make too. This is Paula.
Hi, Paula.
I hear you asking for more money, and that's fine, but I would like to see a plan of how you intend to use that money, because just giving responders a $1 or $2 raise is not going to increase your coverage if you're already starting with a shortfall. So are you looking to hire more full-time people? Are you looking to how are you planning to use this extra money if you get it? I would like to see what kind of change.
Well, agreed
with that money.
I believe we need to have a dedicated EMS crew and a dedicated fire crew as a first response. So I think a first response always available in the valley needs to be 6 to 7 people, which is what, when I talk to the bat chiefs, they're like, yeah, that's a minimum expectation of what you should have.
And this sounds to me like discussion for the board. As Larry said, if the board itself could get together with the chief, maybe early January, and go over this discussion, I think that would be good.
Because that would mean we're asking for a full-time fire department, which is what we've never had before. So I guess
agreed, Paula. But on the current model, we're not always meeting the national standards for coverage for apparatus. You're not supposed to have apparatus roll out of the station with 2 people on it. They should have 3 or 4, right? I mean, you know, 2 in, 2 out, all that stuff. We're not always meeting it. And so we maybe just have to say, okay, we're not doing any interior fire attack. I'm sorry, your person's inside there. I mean, you know, we go down those roads.
So I'm just
gonna-
curious,
gonna-
what is, I just, one more last question. How many calls have you had this year so far, since we're getting close to the end of the year? Just,
I
I
think,
mean, you can go look at your run log. It has the number of calls you've had.
I know, but obviously, let me just pull it up. We're on like 380 or something.
Okay, so that's
100.
380 calls. Even if we get 20 calls in the next week, we're still way below what Chugiak does, and obviously way below what Anchorage does. So just curious.
So we're going to end this meeting, and it sounds like a good idea for the board of directors to get with the chief. And I, as the chair, have to ask for public comment. And if anybody has any public comment, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
To adjourn. Second.
Second. Thanks, everybody. Sorry to cut everybody off at the
Thank
end there,
you.
but
See you the next
we
meeting.
got another meeting at 7.
Yeah, it'll be just a couple minutes before I join that.